I was standing in my driveway on a Tuesday morning in Henderson, Nevada, when I saw Brenda Patterson marching across the street toward my house with her phone pressed to her ear and a look on her face that could curdle milk. I had been living in the Sunset Ridge HOA community for exactly 3 months, and in that time, Brenda had already complained about my grass being a quarter-inch too long, my trash cans being visible from the street for 47 minutes past the allowed time, and my car being parked at what she deemed an inappropriate angle in my own driveway. This time, though, I knew exactly what had set her off. I had started building a pergola in my backyard 2 weeks ago, complete with all the proper permits from the city of Henderson. The structure was coming along beautifully. A solid cedar construction that would provide shade over my patio and increase my property value. I had checked every single HOA rule in the covenant before starting, made sure my design complied with the height restrictions, setback requirements, and even the approved color palette. Everything was by the book. "Quinton Kennedy," Brenda called out, her voice shrill enough to wake the neighbors 3 houses down. "I hope you're prepared for what's coming." I set down the bag of mulch I had been carrying and turned to face her. At 47 years old, I had dealt with difficult people before in my career as a civil engineer, but Brenda operated on a different level entirely. She was 52, had been the HOA president for 6 years, and treated the position like she was running a small dictatorship rather than a neighborhood association. "Good morning, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice level. "What seems to be the problem?" She stopped at the edge of my property, her perfectly manicured finger pointing toward my backyard. "The problem is that monstrosity you're building back there. I've called the building inspectors, and they'll be here this afternoon to shut down your little project." My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I have all the necessary permits, Brenda. The city approved my plans weeks ago. Permits don't mean anything if you're violating HOA regulations," she snapped. "That structure is clearly over the height limit, and I'm certain you never submitted the proper architectural review forms to the board." This was where she was wrong, and I knew it with absolute certainty. "I submitted the forms 7 weeks ago. I have the certified mail receipt and the board's written approval that came back 4 weeks ago. Would you like to see them again?" Her face flushed red, a color that clashed terribly with her orange blazer. "That approval was contingent on city permits, which I'm sure you don't actually have." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened my photos, scrolling to the images of my 3 building permits, all properly posted on my back fence as required. Permit number 2024-78,843 for the structural work. Permit 2024-78,844 for the electrical work since I'm adding lighting, and permit 2024-78,845 for the concrete footings. All approved by Henderson's building department on January 8th. Today is February 4th, and I'm well within the project timeline. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the inspectors have to say. I told them you were building an unpermitted structure, and they take that very seriously." She turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, which sat directly across the street from mine with its pristine white exterior and garden that looked like it had been trimmed with surgical precision. I watched her go, feeling my frustration build. This was exactly the kind of petty harassment I had hoped to avoid when I moved to Nevada from California. I had bought this house, a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a pool and a view of the mountains, specifically because I wanted a quiet place to live after my divorce. Instead, I had gotten Brenda Patterson and her reign of terror. I went back to spreading mulch in my front flower beds, trying not to let her ruin my day off. The February sun was warm on my shoulders, and the desert air was dry and clean. I had landscaping to finish before I went back to work on the pergola, and I wasn't going to let Brenda's tantrum derail my plans. Around 1 in the afternoon, a white truck with Henderson Building Department printed on the side pulled up in front of my house. 2 inspectors got out, both carrying tablets and wearing city identification badges. I recognized one of them, Miguel Santos, who had done the preliminary inspection on my foundation work the week before. "Afternoon, Quinton," Miguel said, shaking my hand. "We got a call about unpermitted construction at this address. Want to show us what you're working on?" "Absolutely," I said. "Follow me around back." I led them through my side gate into the backyard, where my partially completed pergola stood. The main posts were up, the cross beams were installed, and I had been working on the decorative lattice work on the sides. It was a solid 12 feet by 16 feet structure, with the top beam exactly 9 feet off the ground, a full foot below the HOA's 10-foot height restriction for backyard structures. The second inspector, whose badge read David Chen, walked around the pergola, examining the posts and checking the concrete footings. Miguel pulled out a measuring tape and started taking measurements while David photographed everything with his tablet. "Your permits are posted," Miguel noted, pointing to where I had them displayed on the fence in weatherproof sleeves. "That's good. Let's see here, structural permit, electrical, and foundation. All current, all properly filed." I heard my side gate open again, and turned to see Brenda rushing into my backyard, followed by 2 other HOA board members I recognized. Patricia Morrison and Janet Wheeler, both women in their late 50s who seemed to take their cues from Brenda on everything. "Officers," Brenda said breathlessly, "thank you for coming so quickly. As you can see, this structure is clearly in violation." Miguel looked up from his measurements with a slightly amused expression. "Madam, we're not officers, we're building inspectors. And I need to ask you to step back while we complete our inspection." "I'm the HOA president," Brenda insisted. "I have every right to be here." "This is private property," David said without looking up from his tablet. "Unless the homeowner invites you to stay, you're trespassing." I almost felt bad for the flash of humiliation that crossed Brenda's face. Almost. "Brenda, I think it's best if you wait outside." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water before she spun around and stalked back toward the gate, Patricia and Janet trailing behind her like ducklings following their mother. I could hear her loudly complaining on the other side of the fence, but at least she was out of the way. Miguel finished his measurements and compared them against something on his tablet. Height is 9 feet at the highest point, well within code. Footings look good, nice and deep. The posts are properly attached and rated for the load. Electrical work hasn't been started yet. "Not yet," I confirmed. "I'm planning to have the licensed electrician come out next week to run the lines for the overhead lighting. That's why I got the electrical permit in advance." "Smart," David said. "Too many people start the work and then try to get the permit." "Shows you know what you're doing." He tapped a few things on his tablet. "Everything here looks good, Quinton. The structure matches your approved plans, you're following proper construction methods, and all your permits are in order. I'm going to mark this inspection as passed." Relief washed over me, though I had been confident everything was correct. "Thank you. I appreciate you coming out." "No problem," Miguel said. "It's our job. Though I'll be honest, we get a lot of calls from HOAs that turn out to be neighborhood disputes rather than actual code violations. Between you and me, you might want to document everything with your HOA board, keep copies of all correspondence." "I already do," I said. "I learned quickly with this one." David chuckled. Yeah, we've been to this neighborhood before. Couple of the board members are pretty aggressive about calling us. Just keep doing what you're doing, following the rules, and you'll be fine. They headed back toward the front of the house, and I followed them. Brenda was standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, Patricia and Janet flanking her like bodyguards. Several other neighbors had come out to watch the spectacle, including my next-door neighbor Marcus Reed, a retired firefighter in his 60s who had warned me about Brenda within days of my moving in. "Well," Brenda demanded as the inspectors reached their truck. "Are you going to issue a stop work order?" Miguel turned to face her with professional patience. "Madam, we've completed our inspection and everything is in compliance with Henderson building codes. Mr. Kennedy has all the required permits and his construction meets all applicable standards." "But the HOA regulations are between you and the homeowner," David interrupted. "We only enforce municipal code. If you have an HOA dispute, that's a civil matter. But from a building code perspective, everything here is approved." Brenda's face went through several shades of red before settling on something close to purple. "This isn't over," she said, looking directly at me. The inspectors got in their truck and drove away, leaving an uncomfortable silence on the street. Marcus caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up before heading back into his house. The other neighbors dispersed, probably disappointed that there hadn't been more drama. "Brenda," I said, trying one more time to be reasonable, "I showed you the HOA approval. I have the city permits. I'm following every rule. Can we please just drop this? You think you're so smart," she hissed. "Moving in here with your fancy engineering degree and your California money, thinking you can do whatever you want. But I've been protecting property values in this neighborhood for 6 years, and I'm not going to let you ruin it with your tacky additions." "A cedar pergola is hardly tacky," I said, my patience wearing thin. "And it's increasing my property value, which benefits everyone in the neighborhood." "We'll see about that," she said. She looked at Patricia and Janet. "Emergency board meeting tonight, 7 o'clock at my house. We need to discuss this situation." As they walked away, I felt my frustration boil over. This was insane. I had done everything right, followed every rule, got every approval, and Brenda was still trying to manufacture a crisis. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney, Sarah Mitchell, who had helped me with the house purchase and had already dealt with one previous HOA issue when Brenda tried to fine me for my trash cans. "Quinton," Sarah answered on the second ring. "What did Brenda do now?" I explained the situation, including the building inspector visit and Brenda's threat about an emergency meeting. Sarah listened quietly, and I could hear her typing notes. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," she said when I finished. "First, send me photos of everything. The pergola, the posted permits, the inspection report if they gave you one. Second, I want you to write a formal letter to the HOA board, which I'll help you draft, reminding them that they already approved this project and that you're in full compliance with both city code and HOA regulations. Third, you're going to that meeting tonight and you're going to record it. Nevada is a one-party consent state, so you can legally record any conversation you're part of." "You think this is going to escalate?" I asked. "With Brenda Patterson?" "Absolutely. I've dealt with her before on other client matters. She doesn't back down, she doubles down. But here's the thing. She's on very thin ice legally. If she tries to fine you or force you to remove an approved structure, that's grounds for a lawsuit. The HOA could be liable for damages, and as president, she could be personally liable too if we can prove she's acting maliciously rather than in the community's interest." That made me feel slightly better. "Okay, I'll document everything and see you at the meeting." "I'll be there," Sarah confirmed. 7 o'clock, right? I wouldn't miss this. I spent the rest of the afternoon taking detailed photos and videos of the pergola from every angle, including close-ups of the permits and measurements showing the height and setbacks. I also pulled out my file of HOA correspondence, which included my original architectural review application, the board's approval letter signed by Brenda herself, and all the email exchanges where I had asked clarifying questions about the regulations. At 6:30, I walked across the street to Brenda's house with Sarah, who had arrived 15 minutes earlier in her sleek black Tesla. She was in her early 40s, sharp as a tack, and had a reputation for not taking any nonsense from HOA boards. I was grateful to have her on my side. Brenda answered the door with a sour expression. "This is a board meeting. Your attorney isn't a board member." HOA Regulations Section 12, Paragraph 3 states that homeowners may bring legal representation to any meeting where they're discussing matters that directly affect that homeowner, Sarah said smoothly, pulling out her own copy of the HOA bylaws. "We're well within our rights to be here." Brenda's jaw clenched, but she stepped aside to let us in. Her living room was set up like a courtroom, with the 3 board members sitting behind a long, folding table and 2 chairs placed in front of it like we were on trial. Besides Brenda, Patricia, and Janet, there were 2 other board members present. Robert Hayes, a thin man in his 60s who always looked vaguely uncomfortable, and Linda Marshall, a woman in her 50s who seemed more reasonable than the others. I sat down in one of the chairs and pulled out my phone, setting it on my lap with the voice recorder app running. Sarah sat beside me with her tablet and a legal pad. "Let's get started," Brenda said, shuffling papers in front of her. "We're here to discuss the unauthorized construction at 4782 Desert Bloom Court, the property owned by Quinton Kennedy." "For the record," I interrupted, "the construction is fully authorized by both the HOA and the City of Henderson. I'd like to enter into the meeting record my architectural review approval dated December 14th, signed by you, Brenda." I placed a copy of the approval letter on the table. Brenda barely glanced at it. "That approval was granted under false pretenses," she said. "You told us the structure would be decorative, not a full pergola." Sarah leaned forward. "The architectural review application, which I have right here, specifically states cedar pergola, 12 by 16 feet, 9 feet tall at peak, to be constructed over existing patio." There was nothing false about Mr. Kennedy's application. Patricia cleared her throat. "The issue is that the structure is too large and will negatively impact neighborhood aesthetics." "According to what standard?" I asked. "The HOA regulations allow backyard structures up to 200 square feet. My pergola is 192 square feet. The regulations allow structures up to 10 feet tall. Mine is 9 feet. I'm within every specification." Janet jumped in. "But it's made of cedar." "The approved materials list specifies pressure-treated lumber." This was getting ridiculous. Sarah flipped through her copy of the regulations. Section 8, Paragraph 6, Approved materials for backyard structures. Pressure-treated lumber, cedar, redwood, composite materials, or aluminum. Cedar is explicitly listed as an approved material. Would you like me to read the exact text? Brenda's face was getting red again. "The point is that this structure is inappropriate for the neighborhood character. As board president, I have the authority to revoke approvals if I determine they are not in the community's best interest." "Actually, you don't," Sarah said firmly. "Once the board approves an architectural review application, that approval can only be revoked if the homeowner materially changes the plans or violates the approved specifications. Mr. Kennedy has done neither. If you attempt to revoke his approval now, you'll be exposing the HOA to significant legal liability. Robert Hayes spoke up for the first time, his voice quiet. I have to say, I don't see what the problem is here. Quinton followed all the rules, got our approval, got the city permits. His pergola looks nice from what I saw when I drove by earlier. Why are we even having this meeting? Because rules mean something, Brenda snapped. If we let one person bend the rules, everyone will think they can do whatever they want. But he didn't bend any rules, Linda Marshall said, looking genuinely confused. I'm looking at the file right now and everything is in order. I don't understand what we're voting on. We're voting on whether to require Mr. Kennedy to remove the structure, Brenda said. Sarah stood up. If this board votes to require the removal of an approved, permitted structure that complies with all HOA regulations and city codes, I will have an injunction filed by tomorrow morning. Furthermore, I will pursue damages for the cost of construction, lost property value, and emotional distress. And I'll be naming each board member individually in the lawsuit, not just the HOA as an entity. That got their attention. Patricia and Janet exchanged nervous glances. Robert was shaking his head. Even Linda looked worried. You can't threaten us, Brenda said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. That's not a threat. It's a statement of fact about what will happen if you proceed with this legally baseless action, Sarah replied. I've dealt with enough HOA disputes to know exactly how this plays out. You have no grounds to revoke approval, no grounds to demand removal, and no grounds to fine Mr. Kennedy. If you proceed anyway, you'll lose in court, and the HOA's insurance rates will skyrocket when you have to file a claim for the damages. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Robert spoke up. I move that we table this matter indefinitely and allow Quinton's approved construction to continue. Second, Linda said immediately. Brenda looked like she had bitten into a lemon. All in favor, Robert and Linda raised their hands. Patricia and Janet looked at Brenda uncertainly before slowly raising their hands as well. Brenda was the only one who didn't vote. Motion carries, Robert said. Meeting adjourned. Sarah and I left quickly, stepping out into the cool February evening. I felt like I could finally breathe again. That went better than expected, Sarah said as we walked back toward my house. Brenda overplayed her hand. The other board members aren't stupid. They know she was pursuing a personal vendetta rather than protecting the community. You think she'll back off now? I asked. Sarah gave me a sympathetic look. Probably not. People like Brenda don't back off. They find new angles. But you handled this one perfectly. Just keep documenting everything, keep following the rules, and call me if she tries anything else. I thanked her and watched her drive away before heading back to my house. Marcus was sitting on his porch and called out to me. How'd it go? He asked. I walked over and sat on his porch steps, suddenly exhausted. They backed down, voted to let me continue the construction. Marcus nodded. Good. Brenda's been a problem for years. Most people just give in to her because it's easier than fighting. My wife and I almost moved 3 years ago because of her constant harassment. We wanted to put in a fountain in our front yard. Had all the right permits, HOA approval, everything. She still made our lives miserable during the construction. Called the city on us 4 times for various imaginary violations. Why do people keep electing her as president? I asked. Because she runs unopposed, Marcus said. The elections are in November, and every year, she's the only one who submits her name. Most people don't want the hassle of being on the board, and the ones who might challenge her don't want to deal with the drama. Plus, she's got Patricia and Janet who do whatever she says, so she's got a voting bloc. An idea started forming in my mind. What if someone else ran? Marcus raised his eyebrows. You thinking about it? Maybe, I said. I've got 8 months until the election. That's enough time to meet more neighbors, understand the issues, maybe build some support. I'm tired of dealing with this kind of petty tyranny. I'd vote for you, Marcus said. And I know at least a dozen other neighbors who would too. People are sick of Brenda's attitude. We just needed someone willing to stand up to her. I went to bed that night feeling motivated rather than frustrated. If Brenda wanted a fight, I'd give her one. But I'd do it the right way, by running for HOA president and actually trying to make the neighborhood better rather than using the position as a power trip. The next morning, I was back to work on the pergola. The weather was perfect, mid-60s and sunny, ideal for construction. I had the lattice panels to install on 2 sides, and then I needed to sand and seal the entire structure before the electrician came next week. I was on a ladder, drilling pilot holes for the lattice attachment, when I heard raised voices from the street. I climbed down and walked around to the front of the house to see Brenda arguing with a mail carrier, a young woman in her 20s who looked completely bewildered. "I'm telling you, this package wasn't delivered properly," Brenda was saying, holding a small cardboard box. "It was supposed to be placed on my porch, not left at the mailbox." "Madam, the tracking shows it was delivered to the correct address," the mail carrier said. "If you have a complaint about where it was placed, you can contact the post office." "I'm contacting you right now," Brenda snapped. "You're the one who delivered it wrong." I walked over, more to support the mail carrier than anything else. "Everything okay?" The mail carrier gave me a grateful look. "Just explaining delivery procedures." Brenda turned her glare on me. "This doesn't concern you, Quinton." "Just being neighborly," I said, "making sure everyone's all right." The mail carrier took the opportunity to escape, hurrying back to her truck and driving away. Brenda clutched her package and looked at me with undisguised hostility. "You think you won last night," she said. "But I know what you're planning. Marcus has a big mouth. You really think you can challenge me for the board?" I hadn't told anyone but Marcus, which meant Brenda had been talking to him or someone had overheard our conversation. Either way, there was no point in denying it. "I'm thinking about running, yes," I said. "The community might benefit from some new leadership." "You don't know anything about running an HOA," she said. "I've kept this neighborhood's property values stable for 6 years. Before I became president, this place was going downhill. People weren't maintaining their yards. Houses were being painted whatever colors people wanted. It was chaos. Or maybe it was people living their lives without someone micromanaging them," I said. "There's a difference between maintaining standards and harassing your neighbors over every tiny thing." "You've been here 3 months," she said. 3 months, and you think you know better than someone who's been here for 12 years. You're arrogant and you're going to regret this." She stormed off before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I was making a huge mistake by antagonizing her further. But then, I thought about the mail carrier's relieved face when I intervened, about Marcus and his wife almost moving because of Brenda's harassment, about all the other neighbors who probably just wanted to live peacefully without someone breathing down their necks about trash, placement, and grass height. No, I wasn't making a mistake. Someone needed to stand up to her. Over the next 2 weeks, I finished the pergola. The electrician installed beautiful string lights that hung in elegant swoops across the beams, and I added outdoor furniture and some potted plants. It looked amazing, exactly what I had envisioned when I bought the house. I threw a small barbecue and invited Marcus and his wife, along with a few other neighbors I had gotten to know. Everyone loved the pergola and several people asked for my contractor's information for their own projects. Brenda drove by twice during the barbecue, slowing down to stare at my backyard before driving on. I waved at her both times. She didn't wave back. Things were quiet for about a week after that. I started to wonder if maybe Brenda had finally given up. I should have known better. On a Saturday morning in late February, I woke up to find a letter from the HOA in my mailbox. It was a violation notice, stating that I was in breach of community standards for having excessive decorative elements in my backyard that were visible from neighboring properties. The fine was $500, due within 30 days. I took photos of the letter and immediately called Sarah. She answered with a groan. "Let me guess," she said. "Another bogus violation from Brenda, excessive decorative elements," I read. "Whatever that means." "It means nothing," Sarah said. "There's no regulation about decorative elements. She's making things up now. Don't pay the fine. I'll send a response letter on Monday explaining that this violation notice is invalid and demanding they rescind it." "Will they?" I asked. "They should if they have any sense. If they don't, we escalate. But Quinton, I have to tell you, this is getting into harassment territory. We might want to consider filing a formal complaint or even pursuing legal action against Brenda personally." I thought about it. "Let's hold off on that for now. I don't want to give her ammunition to use against me when I run for president. She'll say I'm suing the HOA because I'm vindictive or whatever." "Your call," Sarah said, "but document everything. Every letter, every interaction, every conversation. If this continues, we'll need all of it." The following Monday, I got home from work to find a car I didn't recognize parked in front of my house. As I pulled into my driveway, two people got out of the car, a man and a woman, both dressed in business casual and carrying clipboards. "Quinton Kennedy?" the woman asked as I got out of my truck. "That's me," I said warily. "I'm Nicole from Desert Property Management, and this is Tom. We've been contracted by the Sunset Ridge HOA to conduct a property compliance audit. We need to inspect your home and yard." This was new. Did the whole neighborhood get audited or just me? Nicole and Tom exchanged a glance. "We're conducting random audits as requested by the HOA board," Tom said, which wasn't really an answer. "You have identification?" I asked. They both showed me business cards and company IDs. Desert Property Management was a real company that did HOA management services in the Las Vegas area. This wasn't some scam Brenda had cooked up, at least not an illegal one. "Fine," I said. "What do you need to see?" They walked around my property with their clipboards, taking notes and photos. They measured my grass height, checked my fence for damage, examined my front door color, and spent a long time in the backyard looking at the pergola. I followed them the entire time, taking my own photos and videos of what they were doing. After about 40 minutes, they finished up. Nicole handed me a copy of their report. "You'll receive the official version from the HOA board within a week," she said. "But I can tell you that we found several areas of concern." I looked at the report. According to their findings, my pergola was architecturally incompatible with neighboring structures. My front door wreath was a non-approved decoration. My garden edging stones were the wrong color, and my mailbox flag was faded and in need of replacement. "This is ridiculous," I said. The pergola was approved by the board. The wreath is a plain green wreath that's been there since Christmas. The edging stones are brown, which is a neutral color, and my mailbox flag looks fine. "We just report what we find," Tom said with a shrug. "The board will determine what action to take." After they left, I called Sarah again. She was starting to sound very tired of Brenda Patterson. "They're building a case," she said after I read her the report. "They're going to pile up a bunch of minor violations, real or imaginary, and then try to paint you as a problem resident. It's a tactic some aggressive HOA boards use. The goal is to either force you to move or to have ammunition against you if you run for the board." "So what do I do?" I asked. "You fix the things that are actually violations, document that the others aren't violations, and you prepare for a fight," Sarah said. "I'll send another letter to the board explaining that the pergola was approved. Decorative wreaths are allowed under the regulations, and the other items they cited aren't actually violations. But Quinton, you need to start thinking seriously about whether you want to stay in this neighborhood. This level of harassment isn't normal and it might not stop." "I'm not moving," I said firmly. "I bought this house, I love this house, and I'm not going to let Brenda Patterson bully me out of my own home. Plus, the election is in November. If I can win, I can fix this whole situation." "Okay," Sarah said. "Then we fight, but be prepared because it's going to get worse before it gets better." She was right. Over the next month, I received 3 more violation notices. One for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight, which was supposedly prohibited for commercial vehicles, even though my truck was just a regular pickup with my company logo on the door. One for having my garage door open for more than 2 hours on a Saturday while I was organizing my tools. And one for having outdoor furniture on my front porch, which was supposedly limited to 2 chairs when I had 2 chairs and a small table. Sarah responded to each violation notice with detailed letters explaining why they were invalid. The parking notice was wrong because the regulation about commercial vehicles only applied to vehicles over a certain size, which mine wasn't. The garage door notice was wrong because there was no time limit on how long garage doors could be open. The furniture notice was wrong because the regulation didn't mention tables, only chairs. None of the notices were rescinded, but no fines were enforced either. Brenda seemed content to just keep sending them, creating a paper trail of alleged violations even though none of them held up to scrutiny. In March, I decided to start campaigning seriously for the board position. I created a simple flyer explaining my background, my commitment to fair and reasonable HOA governance, and my desire to reduce conflicts in the neighborhood. I walked door to door on evenings and weekends, introducing myself to neighbors and listening to their concerns. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People had complaints about everything from high HOA fees that didn't seem to fund any improvements, to Brenda's aggressive enforcement style, to a general feeling that the board didn't represent their interests. Several people told me stories similar to mine, of being harassed over minor issues or being hit with questionable fines. I also discovered that Brenda had enemies beyond just the homeowners. At the monthly HOA meeting in March, which I attended as a regular resident, there was a heated discussion about the landscaping contract for the community common areas. Brenda wanted to renew the contract with the current company, Green Vista Landscaping, but several residents pointed out that their work had been subpar and their prices kept increasing. Marcus stood up during the comment period. I got quotes from 3 other landscaping companies. All of them can do better work for less money than Green Vista. Why are we staying with a company that's overcharging us? Green Vista has been our landscaping company for 4 years, Brenda said. They know our property, they are reliable, and switching companies would be disruptive. Disruptive how? Linda Marshall asked. She had become noticeably more willing to question Brenda since the meeting about my pergola. We'd just be hiring a different company to mow the grass and trim the bushes. It's not complicated. I move that we solicit competitive bids from other landscaping companies before renewing the Green Vista contract, Robert Hayes said. Brenda looked furious, but Patricia seconded the motion before she could say anything. The vote was 4-1 in favor, with only Brenda voting against. After the meeting, I was talking with Marcus in the parking lot when a man in his 30s approached us. He introduced himself as Derek Phillips and said he lived on the other side of the neighborhood. "I heard you're thinking about running for the board," Derek said. "I want to help. I've been documenting Brenda's behavior for 2 years. I have emails, violation notices, meeting recordings, everything. She tried to force me to cut down a tree in my front yard last year, said it violated some regulation that didn't exist. I ended up having to hire a lawyer to make her back off." "I'd love to see what you have," I said. "I'm trying to understand the full scope of what's been going on." Derek invited Marcus and me to his house that evening. His wife, Rachel, had organized everything into binders, sorted by date and category. There were dozens of violation notices, many of them for things that clearly weren't violations. Correspondence with attorneys, including Sarah Mitchell, which was how Derek knew about her. Meeting minutes showing Brenda voting against common sense improvements and in favor of punitive enforcement measures. "Why haven't you run for the board yourself?" I asked Derek. "I travel for work too much," he said. "I'm gone half the month." Rachel thought about it, but she's dealing with some health issues and doesn't need the stress. "But we'll support you, campaign for you, whatever you need." By the end of March, I had a small team of neighbors helping with my campaign. We created a website, printed more flyers, and started planning a community meet and greet for May. The election wasn't until November, but we wanted to build momentum early, Brenda noticed. At the April HOA meeting, she announced that the board was implementing new regulations about political campaigning within the community. Effective immediately, no campaign materials may be displayed on private property more than 30 days before the election, she read from a prepared statement. No door-to-door soliciting for votes is permitted, and no campaign events may be held on community common property. "You can't do that," I said from the audience. "Those regulations violate the First Amendment. You can't restrict political speech on private property." "These are private community regulations that all residents agreed to when they purchased their homes," Brenda said smugly. Sarah, who had started attending the meetings with me, stood up. "Actually, HOA regulations cannot supersede constitutional rights. Any attempt to enforce these restrictions would be immediately struck down in court, and the HOA would be liable for damages and attorney fees. I strongly recommend the board consult with their attorney before proceeding." Linda Marshall looked worried. "We didn't vote on these regulations." "Brenda, when did the board approve this?" "I'm using my authority as president to implement emergency regulations to preserve community harmony," Brenda said. "That's not a power the president has," Robert Hayes said, flipping through his copy of the bylaws. "The board has to vote on new regulations, and homeowners have to be given 30 days' notice and an opportunity to comment." "I second Robert's concern," Linda said. "These regulations haven't been properly approved. We can't enforce them." Brenda's face was red again. "Fine. I move that we approve these regulations." "I move that we table this matter until we can get an opinion from the HOA's attorney about whether these regulations are legal," Robert countered. Linda seconded immediately. The vote was 4-1 in favor of tabling, with only Brenda and Patricia voting against. Janet abstained, looking uncomfortable. I caught up with Janet after the meeting. She was in her late 50s, soft-spoken, and seemed to genuinely want to help the community even though she usually just went along with whatever Brenda said. "Janet, can I ask you something?" I said. "Why do you keep voting with Brenda when you clearly don't agree with her?" Janet looked around nervously as if Brenda might pop out from behind a car. "She's very persuasive, and she's done so much for the community over the years. I don't want to seem ungrateful. But she's harassing residents," I said gently. including me. You've seen the violation notices she sends out. Most of them aren't even real violations. I know, Janet said quietly. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she says she's protecting property values. She really believes she's doing the right thing. Good intentions don't excuse bad behavior, I said. And as a board member, you have a responsibility to all the residents, not just to Brenda. Think about it. Janet nodded slowly and got in her car without saying anything else. I hoped I had gotten through to her. In May, we held the community meet and greet at Marcus's house, since we couldn't use common property. About 40 neighbors showed up, which was a significant percentage of the 200 homes in the community. I gave a short speech about my vision for the HOA, focusing on fair enforcement, transparent governance, and actually improving the neighborhood rather than just punishing people. The feedback was incredible. People were excited about the possibility of change. Several residents shared their own stories of dealing with Brenda, and there was a general sense that the community was ready for new leadership. Brenda didn't attend the meet and greet, but Patricia did. She spent the entire time standing in the back with her arms crossed, not talking to anyone, just watching and taking notes. It was creepy, but we ignored her. The next day, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney's office. My heart sank as I opened it, expecting more bogus violations. Instead, it was a cease and desist letter claiming that I was defaming Brenda Patterson by making false and malicious statements about her conduct as HOA president. I called Sarah immediately. This is absurd. I haven't made any false statements. Everything I've said about her is documented and true. It's a slap-suit threat, Sarah explained. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're trying to intimidate you into stopping your campaign by threatening legal action. The good news is that Nevada has strong anti-slap laws. If they actually sue you, we can get it dismissed quickly and recover our attorney fees. But the goal here is to scare you off before it gets that far. I'm not scared, I said. What do I do? You ignore it, Sarah said. Don't respond, don't acknowledge it, just keep doing what you're doing. If they actually file a lawsuit, which I doubt they will, we'll deal with it then. But this is just a scare tactic. I took her advice and continued campaigning. In June, we organized a neighborhood cleanup day where volunteers picked up litter, pulled weeds from common areas, and generally made the community look nicer. It was a huge success, with over 60 people participating. Local news even sent a reporter who did a short segment about community engagement. Brenda was not pleased. At the June HOA meeting, she spent 20 minutes complaining about how the cleanup day wasn't properly authorized and how we had created liability issues by having residents work on common property without insurance waivers. We were pulling weeds, Brenda, not operating heavy machinery, Marcus said. And the community looks better than it has in months. Maybe if the landscaping company was doing their job properly, we wouldn't have needed a volunteer cleanup day. That touched a nerve. The board had solicited bids from other landscaping companies as voted, and 3 companies had come back with proposals that were better and cheaper than Green Vista. The board was scheduled to vote on the new contract at this meeting. When they got to that agenda item, Brenda argued passionately for staying with Green Vista, citing their experience and reliability. But Robert, Linda, and even Janet voted for the new company, a local operation called Desert Bloom Landscaping that had excellent references and was charging 20% less. This is a mistake, Brenda said. You're all going to regret this when the new company fails to deliver. They have a 6-month trial period in the contract, Linda pointed out. If they don't perform, we can terminate and find someone else. but I think we owe it to the community to at least try saving money and getting better service. After the meeting, I was approached by a man I'd seen at several meetings but never spoken to. He introduced himself as Vincent Torres and said he was the owner of Green Vista Landscaping. "I just want you to know that Brenda Patterson has been padding our invoices for 2 years," he said quietly. "She told me to bill for extra services that we never performed and she'd approve the payments. I went along with it because I needed the business, but I've been feeling guilty about it. Now that we're losing the contract anyway, I thought you should know." My stomach dropped. "Are you saying Brenda has been embezzling from the HOA? "I don't know what she was doing with the extra money," Vincent said. "I just know she told me to inflate the bills and that she'd make sure they got paid. I have emails if you want to see them." "Yes," I said immediately. "And you need to talk to a lawyer. This could be fraud." Vincent hesitated. "I don't want to get in trouble." "You participated in fraud," I said bluntly. "The best thing you can do now is cooperate and provide evidence. Talk to an attorney about immunity in exchange for testimony." "But this is serious, and it needs to be reported." Vincent nodded reluctantly and left. I immediately called Sarah and explained what had happened. "We need to report this to the board," she said, "but not to Brenda. Contact Robert Hayes and Linda Marshall directly. Tell them what you learned, and that they need to conduct an audit of the HOA finances immediately. If there's embezzlement, they have a fiduciary duty to investigate." I reached out to Robert and Linda that night via email, explaining what Vincent had told me. Both of them called me within an hour, deeply concerned. "I've had questions about the landscaping bills for a while," Robert said. "They always seemed high, but Brenda said that was the market rate. If she's been stealing from the HOA, that's criminal." "We need to move carefully," Linda said when I spoke to her. "If we accuse Brenda without evidence, she'll sue us personally. But we can initiate a financial audit as part of our normal board duties. We don't need to tell her why." At the July board meeting, Robert moved to hire an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances for the past 3 years. Linda seconded. Brenda immediately objected. "We just had an audit 2 years ago," she said. "This is a waste of money." "A lot can happen in 2 years," Robert said. "And several residents have raised questions about our expenses. An audit will either confirm that everything is fine, or it will identify areas where we can improve our financial management. Either way, it's good governance." "I vote no," Brenda said. "The vote is 3-2 in favor," Linda said after Patricia voted with Brenda and Robert. Linda and Janet voted for the audit. Motion carries. Brenda looked like she wanted to flip the table over. "This is politically motivated. You're all helping Quinton's campaign by making me look bad." "We're doing our duty as board members," Janet said quietly. It was the first time I'd heard her directly contradict Brenda. "If the finances are clean, the audit will show that. If they're not, we need to know." The audit was scheduled to begin in August. In the meantime, I continued campaigning and working on my house. The pergola had become a neighborhood gathering spot, and I regularly had people over for evening barbecues or just to sit and enjoy the cool desert nights under the string lights. In late July, I came home from work to find my front door standing open. My heart raced as I approached cautiously, pulling out my phone to call 911. "This is Quinton Kennedy at 4782 Desert Bloom Court in Henderson," I told the dispatcher. "I came home and my front door is open. I don't know if someone broke in or if I'm still in danger." The police arrived within 5 minutes. 2 officers cleared my house while I waited outside and then called me in to look around. Nothing was stolen. My TV was still there, my laptop was on the kitchen table, my wallet was on my dresser, but things had been moved. Drawers were opened, papers were shuffled, my filing cabinet had been rifled through. Anything missing? One of the officers asked. I checked carefully. I don't think so. But someone was definitely looking for something. Any idea what they might have been looking for? I hesitated, then decided to be honest. I'm running for HOA president, and there's been a lot of conflict with the current president. I have documentation of harassment and potential financial fraud. If someone wanted to destroy that evidence or find out what I know, this would be where they'd look. The officer raised his eyebrows. That's pretty serious. You have actual evidence of fraud. The HOA board is conducting an audit based on information from a contractor, I said. I don't have direct evidence myself, but I have records of being harassed. They took a full report, dusted for fingerprints, and checked the door lock. There was no sign of forced entry, which meant either I had left it unlocked, which I never did, or someone had a key. Change your locks, the officer advised, and consider a security system if you don't have one. You have somewhere else you can stay tonight. I'm not leaving my house, I said firmly, but I'll change the locks right now. After the police left, I called Marcus, who came over immediately with his son to help me change all the locks on my doors. We also installed motion sensor lights at all my entry points and a video doorbell that I'd been meaning to put up for months. You think Brenda did this? Marcus asked as we worked. I don't know, I said honestly, but the timing is suspicious. The audit starts in 2 weeks. I'm gaining support in the neighborhood, and suddenly someone breaks into my house but doesn't steal anything. They were looking for something specific. You should tell your lawyer, Marcus said. I called Sarah and explained what happened. She was quiet for a long moment. Quinton, this is escalating beyond normal HOA drama, she said finally. If Brenda or someone working for her broke into your house, that's a felony. We're talking criminal charges, not just civil disputes. You need to be very careful. I know, I said. But I'm not backing down. The election is in 4 months. I can make it 4 months. The audit began in early August. The auditing firm, Henderson Financial Services, had full access to all the HOA's bank records, invoices, and financial documents. Brenda tried to be present for every meeting between the auditors and the board, but Robert and Linda insisted that the auditors needed to work independently. 2 weeks into the audit, the lead auditor, a woman named Michelle Wright, requested a special board meeting. I wasn't invited since I wasn't on the board, but Robert called me immediately afterward. You were right, he said, his voice shaking. Michelle found evidence of embezzlement. Brenda's been diverting HOA funds for at least 2 years, maybe longer. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. What happens now? I asked. We're meeting with the HOA's attorney tomorrow to discuss legal options, but Michelle said we need to report this to the police. This isn't just a civil matter anymore, it's criminal fraud. The next day, Linda Marshall called me. The board voted to terminate Brenda as president, effective immediately. We're also filing a police report. Robert is taking over as president until the election in November. How did Brenda react? I asked. She didn't, Linda said. She didn't show up to the meeting. We sent her a certified letter notifying her of the meeting, but she never came. We voted without her. That evening, I was sitting on my back patio under the pergola when I saw police cars pull up to Brenda's house. I watched from my backyard as 2 detectives knocked on her door and spent about an hour inside. When they came out, Brenda was with them in handcuffs. It was surreal, watching someone I'd been fighting with for months being arrested. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. Mostly, I just felt sad that it had come to this. The news spread through the neighborhood quickly. By the next morning, everyone knew that Brenda had been arrested for embezzling from the HOA. The local news picked up the story, describing it as a cautionary tale about HOA governance and the importance of financial oversight. Vincent Torres did end up cooperating with the police, providing emails and records showing how Brenda had directed him to inflate invoices. The investigation revealed that she had been pocketing the difference, using the money for personal expenses, including a vacation home in Arizona that none of her neighbors had known about. The auditors ultimately determined that Brenda had stolen approximately $63,000 from the HOA over a 3-year period. She was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Patricia Morrison and Janet Wheeler weren't charged with any crimes, but both resigned from the board immediately. Patricia claimed she had no knowledge of the embezzlement, though she had certainly helped Brenda harass residents. Janet was more honest, admitting that she had suspected something was wrong but had been too afraid of Brenda to speak up. With 3 board seats vacant and the election coming up in November, Robert appointed Marcus and Linda Marshall as interim board members. Derek Phillips volunteered to fill the 3rd seat temporarily. The new board immediately rescinded all the questionable fines that had been issued over the past year, including all the ones against me. They also commissioned a full review of the HOA regulations to remove vague or overly restrictive rules that had been used for harassment. It was exactly the kind of reform I had been hoping to implement if I won the election. Speaking of which, with Brenda gone, my campaign took on a different tone. Instead of running against an oppressive regime, I was now running to help continue the positive changes that were already starting. Several other residents decided to run for the board as well, and we had competitive but friendly campaigns leading up to the election. In November, I won one of the open board seats with a strong majority. Marcus won another seat, and a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to the former board member, won the 3rd. Robert stayed on as president, and we settled into what felt like a much healthier HOA governance structure. Brenda's criminal case moved through the courts over the following months. In March of the next year, she pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, serve 18 months in prison, and complete 3 years of probation. She and her husband ended up selling their house to pay the restitution, and I heard they moved out of state after she served her sentence. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall. The whole situation had been unnecessary and destructive. If she had just focused on actually serving the community, instead of using her position as a power trip and a source of illegal income, none of this would have happened. As for me, I served on the HOA board for 3 years, helping to transform it from a source of neighborhood conflict into an organization that actually improved the community. We used the recovered funds from Brenda's restitution to make real improvements. New playground equipment for the community park, upgraded landscaping, and even a neighborhood block party that became an annual tradition. My pergola still stands in my backyard, a reminder of where all this started. It's weathered now, the cedar taking on a beautiful silver-gray patina from the desert sun. I still host barbecues there regularly, and it's become a symbol in the neighborhood of standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. The whole experience taught me important lessons about community governance, the importance of oversight and accountability, and the danger of giving too much unchecked power to any individual. It also taught me that sometimes the people who claim to be protecting the community are actually the ones damaging it the most. But more than anything, it taught me the value of standing up for yourself and others, even when it's uncomfortable. If I had just paid those bogus fines and torn down my approved pergola like Brenda wanted, she would have continued her harassment and embezzlement unchecked. By fighting back, not just for myself, but by bringing the community together, we ended up creating real positive change. The building inspectors who came out that first day and approved everything on site had no idea they were setting off a chain of events that would lead to criminal charges, board elections, and a complete transformation of how our HOA operated. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying, "No, this isn't right," to start a movement. I still live in that house in Henderson, Nevada, and I love my neighborhood. We have our disagreements and challenges like any community, but we handle them with transparency, fairness, and genuine concern for each other's well-being. That's what an HOA is supposed to be, and I'm proud that we figured that out together. The sunset looks particularly beautiful from under my pergola on summer evenings, the string lights twinkling as the desert sky turns orange and purple. I often think back to that morning when Brenda first threatened to call the building inspectors, and I'm grateful that I stood my ground. Not just because I got to keep my pergola, but because that moment of resistance became the catalyst for changing an entire community for the better. And that's worth more than any backyard structure, no matter how beautiful it is.